Well, are you glad to be a child of God this morning? Yes, I am. I'm so thankful for that. I'd like you to turn in your Bibles this morning, the book of James, if you would, as we look at a passage that we started last week. I'd like to take some time and look at once again here this morning. Holly, could you get me some water, please, somewhere? James chapter 1. And starting in verse number 2, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. I want to talk for a few moments this morning on when life hands you lemons. What's the rest of that? When life hands you lemons, what? How many of you like lemonade? 3 of you do. That's good. When life gives you lemons, I've often heard it said that we're either going into, in the middle of, or coming out of a trial. I found that to be true in my life. I don't know about yours. But James talks about this in a different way. He says, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations. Just to review for a moment from last week, is that we are all unfinished projects. I give the example that there are many unfinished projects in my life, and I've been an unfinished project. I've been someone that someone has made a passing statement to, like, hey, man, I'd love to get together. Someone I admire, someone I respect, I'd love to get together. I'll give you a call. And I hang on that statement like, we're going to call, we're going to be best friends, and it's going to be awesome. Only to realize that they never call. It was just a passing statement, unintentional offense, but it hurt nonetheless. And I've realized that I've done that to other people too. People that might think something of me, and I say, okay, man, we'll get together. That'll be great. We'll do this. And I intentionally leave them feeling unimportant. Unfinished project. So we're all an unfinished project. Every one of us has growing to do. Let us grow in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. None of us have yet arrived. Paul says it this way in Philippians. He says, I've not apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, I press toward the mark. Paul said, listen, one thing I know for sure is that I have not arrived. So we're all unfinished projects. Would you agree with that this morning? That every one of us are still in a process of sanctification. Positionally, God, when He saved us, sanctified us, but there is a practical side of that as we appropriate His power in our life as we walk through this life together, that we understand we haven't arrived yet. We haven't been completely transformed into His image. This is a process. I have been doing right and realized, or thought anyway, that God had done me wrong in the sense of I'm trying to do right and just stuff keeps happening. Have you ever been there? Like, I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm making the right choices, and things just keep coming into my life. And I thought when I served the Lord that He was supposed to take care of all of that. And we quickly find out that it rains on the just and the unjust. We quickly find out that we all have problems that come into our life. I felt slighted and forgotten. There have been times where I've really messed up. I have sinned, I've messed up, and I'm far from God because of me. Not by anybody else's choice, but because of me. I've messed up. And I have tried to live good apart from Him. I've been in every one of those situations where I've been trying to do good, but I've been doing it apart from Him, in my own power, in my own strength. I've been in places where I've messed up really bad. And all of these places, I felt like an unfinished project in the sense of I'm placed on a shelf and I'm not being used anymore. A few months ago, we had some visitors that stayed with us for a few weeks. These 3 little boys were with us, and all the while they were with us, they just rotated watching Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, Toy Story 4, and 5 and 6. I think there's a blue million of these things. I have no idea why they made so many Toy Stories, but they did. And one thing about that little movie that, sometimes when it's in front of your face, you don't go searching for these things. It's not, okay, I like cartoons. All right, I do. I'm not going to deny it. I like children's movies, and I'm not ashamed of it either. Anyway, one thing about the Toy Story, there's this fear of being put up on the shelf and not used any longer. If you've ever seen the movie, you know that there's this fear of being forgotten about. The little boy grows up. He goes to college. Oh, hey, he's going to forget about us. There's this sense in which I don't want to be on the shelf somewhere. And like that, there's sometimes in life where we just feel like, God, what are you doing here? What's going on? It doesn't seem like there's any activity going on here. And in fact, it just seems like all that I have when I look around are problems. We're all unfinished projects. Dan read earlier this morning out of Philippians chapter 1, being confident of this very thing, that He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it till the day of Jesus Christ. And we looked at last week that God is working in you and God is working through you. We know that everything that happens in life, I believe it was Adrian Rogers that said it this way, is either authored or allowed by God. God either writes it into our story or He allows it to come into our story. Everything, and that points back to the sovereignty of God. And why that's so important is understanding that God is sovereign, meaning He can do whatever He wants to, whenever He wants to, however He wants to. We read last week, Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for good. All things are not good, but all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose. So getting back to our text this morning, we find in the book of James. He says, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations. Now, we know that problems, issues, circumstances will come. And we find that, I think it's just ingrained in us that when something comes at us like that, we either fight or flee. We either hit it head on or we run. And I've watched many people have a problem, a circumstances, an illness, a death, something come into their life, and they have faced it with grace. They have faced it with knowing that the Lord is with them. I'll never leave thee nor forsake thee. He's a very present help in the time of need. And we know that God is with them. We can see that. I've talked to many grieving families, and the statement that they make so many times is, I don't know how people without the Lord go through something like this. And I found that to be true in my own life. But what about the divers temptations? The word divers means various. It's a describing word that it means there's great diversity and variety in the temptations. I want to address something before we go any further. James 1:13. Because if you read James chapter 1 and you get to the count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, and then you say, you see James 1:13 that says, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. Then we see where the Bible tells us that God tempted Abraham. And so I want to address this just very quickly because I don't want anybody to get hung up on it in this sense, that the Bible is not contradicting itself, but rather using two different meanings or two different words that is translated temptation. In chapter 1 and verse 2, where it says, brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations. That temptation means examination. It's the act of examining something closely as for mistakes. I'm reminded of the book of Jeremiah. When God comes to Jeremiah and he tells Jeremiah, I want you to go down to the potter's house. And when he gets to the potter's house, the potter is working at the wheel. And the potter is taking that piece of clay and he's molding it however he wants to. But then when that clay is molded into a bowl or a dish or whatever he's making at the time, whatever comes from the imagination of the potter is made into the clay, and then that clay is heated up in the kiln. And when that clay comes out, if it has any imperfections in it, the potter can do whatever he wills with that clay. In fact, if the potter makes a bowl and decides that he doesn't like how that bowl is turning out, he can add some water to it. He can make it into something different. He can make the edges a little bit thinner. He can do whatever he wants to with the clay. When we think about this examination, the act of examining something closely as for mistakes, there are some times that God authors or allows things into our life because we know very well when we get shook up, imperfections come out. I was at my parents' yesterday, and David was mowing, and he said, hey, I think we need some gas. And he said, I'm not going to go up here to this station because they never fill up those tanks all the way. They're always low on gas. And what happens when the new load comes in and begins to fill that tank is all the sediment that has gone down at the bottom starts to stir up. And you can start to reap from the imperfections in the gas. Just like that, we see in our own lives when we get shaken up. You shake a bottle of pop up and then try to open it. I know that you've done that to your younger siblings growing up. I'm just saying, if you shake a bottle of pop, what happens? It blows up. And sometimes when we get shaken up, we blow up. Sometimes all the imperfections that we've swept under the rug and all the things that we've tried to hide from others has no way to escape being visible. After all, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And when the heart gets shaken up and we're shaken to the core, things come out of our mouth that were in our heart all along, but we did a good job of disguising it. Count it all joy, my brethren, when you fall into divers temptations, because these temptations, the act of examining closely as for mistakes. Now, when he says these various, it reminds me of Job, because I felt this way. All right, we got this problem. We're facing it head on. We got this. Until something else comes. You're like, okay, we're going to adjust this. Some of us are logistical masters. We're going to adjust a little bit, but we got this. We're going to make it through. We got it. Okay, so now I'm juggling this over here, and I've got this new thing over here, and I'm juggling various and diverse. Oh, we've got this health issue over here, but now we've got this financial issue over here. And as we're juggling along, why don't we throw in a family issue, because they're ticked off about the health issue and how that's being handled, and the financial issue is causing some turmoil between the debtors and the borrowers, and all of these things are going on. Now we're juggling all of this, and the Bible tells us, he says, "Brethren, count it all joy when you fall into these various temptations." And these very diverse temptations. When we think of them as an examination, it's kind of like when you think of an exam and all the things that you learn and you're supposed to know. If somebody shows up and you know the process that's supposed to be done in your job, but when nobody's around, this is a little shortcut here, this is a little shortcut there. But when the boss comes or the inspector comes or something like that, well, guess what? You do the right process, don't you? When the exam is in front of you, we react differently. Brethren, count it all joy when you fall into these diverse and various examinations of your life. How many of you, like me, are kind of inquisitive? I can follow rules, but it really helps me to know why I'm following the rules. How many of you are like that? Like, I want to know the why behind it. And sometimes if there's not a good reason why, I'm like, well, then why do we have to do this, you know? But I learned algebra anyway. So when we think about the why behind this, if God was just to say, my brethren, listen, count it all joy. I want you to be joyful. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I want you to be joyful when all of these various and diverse examinations come to your life. If that was just the end of the statement, all of the rule followers would be okay. All right, we're going to be joyful about this. Why? Because God said so. But there's the other half of the population that goes, well, why? Well, why is that supposed to make me joyful? Why am I supposed to count that as joy? There's nothing about that seems joyful. It's like saying, man, I hit my thumb with a hammer. Isn't that funny? To everybody else maybe, but not to the one who is in pain. But the sentence doesn't even stop there. The thought continues, and he says, knowing this. Why do you count it all joy? Because you can know this. By the way, I'm thankful that God tells us some things that we can know. Not hope, not think, not hope for, but know. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Now, when we see this word trying, it means something that blows my mind. I've read this verse for forever, it seems like. And if you look at the definition, it means this: the trying of your faith. The trying part is the genuineness. The state of not being fake or counterfeit. The trying of your faith worketh patience. We've already established from last week that patience is speaking of this maturing process. It's talking about being steadfast, that having endurance, the power to withstand hardship or stress. The trying of your faith, the genuineness of your faith, the act of not being fake or counterfeit. A rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he goes, I want to go wherever you go. I want to follow you wherever you go. I am with you all the way. Jesus says, well, here's what I want you to do. Follow all the law, all the commandments, all of this. I've done that. Jesus says, fine, we'll go and sell everything that you have. Give it to the poor and follow me. Now, some might walk away and go, Jesus wants us to sell everything that we have, give it to the poor, and that's the way we become his disciple. No, that's not the point. The point is being real, being genuine, not being fake. The trying of your faith stirs up all the impurities. It stirs up everything that we've allowed to settle, and it shows us who we really are. Holly and I just celebrated 20 years of marriage together. I mean, every day has been such a joy. I'm preaching this message, thank you. Every day's a joy, because count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. I've counseled couples getting ready to get married, and I love it. I've determined this, that I have changed premarital counseling into just a couple sessions, and postmarital counseling in that first year or so. That's really when, love is blind, marriage is the eye-opener, right? I remember people say, well, yeah, you're in that honeymoon stage. What are they talking about? They're talking about the love is blind. You know where that comes from? The Bible says that love thinks no evil. Love thinketh no evil in the book of Romans. That means when you love someone, you don't think evil about their motives. You don't think evil about anything that they do. You don't care which way the toilet paper comes off the roll. You're willing to look over those things. You don't care how you squeeze the toothpaste. For goodness sake, just get 2 tubes of toothpaste and just forget it. But seriously, we don't care about those things. They're not issues. And then all of a sudden, when we get past the initial stage, some reality kicks in, and you figure out that you are 2 people that struggle with the old man living in the same household, and conflict is there because you don't agree about everything all the time. No 2 people do. And so all of a sudden, what was this perfect scenario, something happens to shake things up. And all of a sudden, you look across the room and you go, I just cannot stand this woman right now. I love you, but I don't want to even be around you. Where was this 6 months ago, And then she looks at you and goes, I had no idea that you left your clothes on the floor like that. What in the world? What did your mother do to you? She didn't actually say that, I'm just saying. But what's happened? Well, what was going on smoothly, when there was a bump in the road, it shook things up. He says, knowing this, that the trying of your faith works patience. Knowing this, that the genuineness of your faith will produce steadfastness and the ability to endure. So all of a sudden, I can't be fake all the time. there will be the nerve. There will be that situation that catches me off guard and I can't mask it, and who I really am comes out. When God either writes it into our life or allows it to come in our life, what He is doing is allowing things to shake up. So when we count it all joy, when we have this mentality that when there's smooth sailing, everything's great, everything's wonderful, but when the storm comes, everything breaks loose. The boss walks in and goes, "Hey, man, our numbers are up. Everything is wonderful. You guys are doing a great job. I'm so proud to be in this organization." Or he walks in and he's like, "Man, things are horrible." You find out what kind of leader someone is when there's trouble. You find out the genuineness of a person when there's temptation, when there's testing, when there's trials. So count it all joy when this happens, when these things come in your life. I think about Paul when, if you remember, he said, I've asked 3 times for this thorn to be taken away. 3 times I've asked God, would you just take this away from me? But he said, I've learned that in my weakness, He is strong. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've prayed for a specific issue that I struggle with physically. Lord, would you just take this away, take this away, take this away, please take this away. And time again, I'm pushed back to understand that when I know that I am weak, I have to depend on Him. So in this weird way, it's kind of a blessing, because if I was really strong in the areas that I'm weak in, I would depend on myself. Last week, we applied this in the area of salvation, that it's not of works lest any man should boast. But Galatians 3:3 says, are you so foolish to think that now that you've begun in the Spirit, now you're going to mature in the flesh? No, that's foolish to think that. All of a sudden, I'm depending on my strength to get me through. And God says, okay, well, if you really think that this is the best way and you can handle this, how about some examination? Then all of a sudden it comes from this corner and comes from this corner and comes from this corner, and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't handle all this. Lord, these examinations, this count it all joy, because it points us to Him. It exposes weaknesses in our lives and points us to Him. The trying of your faith worketh patience. I want you to notice this in Revelation chapter 3. Writing to the church of the Laodiceans, he says, write these things, saith the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works. God knows everything about us from the beginning of time. See, our motives are not hidden from God. Our true motives, our true heart is not hidden from God. God is able to see through the facade. He's able to see through what we have hidden and allowed and tried to just cover up so people don't see who we really are. God sees exactly who we are. He says, I know thy works. Now watch this. He's exposing something in them, that thou art neither hot or cold nor hot. What's he say? I'd rather you be one or the other. How do you get something either cold or hot? If you just leave something alone, it stays. But in order to change it from room temperature, you either got to heat it up or you got to cool it down. So sometimes this trying of our faith, these diverse temptations, these various and diverse examinations that come in our life are actually God's way, either doing it himself or allowing it to happen. It's God's way of heating us up from a very complacent state. How many of you would agree with this statement? The closer, or either, let me say it this way, the most difficult times in my life is when I have learned to be closest with the Lord. Stirring up to expose. The trying of your faith worketh patience. Now, steadfastness, endurance. I want to play a little clip. I think I texted it to you. I won't play all of it. It's just a little clip by Dave Ramsey. Like him or lump him, I don't care about what you think about his financial advice. I just want you to hear this 30-second clip. He talks about toughening up. Let me see if I can figure out this. Gotcha.
You got to toughen up. I've got that at the bottom of one of my prayer lists currently. Suck it up, Buttercup. Nobody cares. Call the WAMbulance. I know you're supposed to have feelings. You can have those after you get your work done. I know that's old school, and I know some of you that'll send you straight to your therapist, but that's okay. Toughen up. You know what happens when you lift weights? The way muscle is built is you break down fibers. Lactic acid and fibers break down the muscle, the fatty tissues, and starts to move it to muscle. That's why you get sore when you're lifting weights. It's how you get calluses, is you're breaking down material by stressing it. Strength comes from stress, not from being comfortable.
Strength comes from stress, not from being comfortable. You know as well as I do that sometimes we hit things in life and we're like, man, I'm totally unprepared for this. I'm overwhelmed. I can't take this. The counting it all joy part knows that, number one, God is in control over it all. And it could be that he has allowed these things or even sent these things in our life to stir up those imperfections to point us to him. Because in the end, the trying, you being genuine in your faith, will work endurance and steadfastness. Now, here's what he says in verse 4. Let me pause and just say one more thing about that. Have you ever met a parent that wouldn't allow the child to do anything for themselves? Let me open that for you. No, it's okay. I'll do it. Let me open that for you. It's okay. Let me do that for you. They won't allow the child to do anything that's a little bit hard. The kid comes in and goes, they made us run the whole practice. I don't want to go back. And then, well, okay. You're just not feeling it. I understand. Somebody was mean. I understand. So they grow up in a very sheltered environment. And hey, we ought to shelter our kids. We ought to protect our kids. But sheltering them to the point where they can't do anything for themselves. They're offended by the least little thing. What happens? They get out from that umbrella, and the first thing that hits them, they crumble. Why? Because they have never had to face the little things to build strength and endurance to face the hardships of life. Would you agree with this statement? The world that we live in is brutal. It is brutal. And if we aren't allowing, because verse number 4, here's the application, but let this process, let these examinations from all of these various things thrown at you seemingly all at once. Don't be the victim, be the victor. Don't allow them to just cause you to crumble. Go to the one that has all wisdom and all strength. But allow that process of building strength and endurance to have its maturing, its perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. I guarantee you this, if you ever see someone who exhibits supernatural strength in the midst of adversity, you can count on going to somewhere in their past, and probably many places in their past, where they have had to face difficult things before. Because it builds us and it strengthens us. The very next verse, he says allow that patience to have her perfect work. Then he says in verse 5, if any of you lack wisdom. What's he talking about? It's pointing us back to God. All of these things coming in many different directions, and I just don't feel like that I can handle it all. Okay. Anybody lack wisdom? Yes, I lack wisdom. I've got these diverse temptations. I've got everything coming in every different direction. Let him ask of God. That giveth to all men liberally. He won't hold it back. He'll give it to us if we ask. All of this maturing process is to point us to the one who has all strength. He's omnipotent. He's all-powerful. Who has all knowledge. He's omniscient. He's all-knowing. The only one that has all wisdom. He says, if you lack it, you just ask for it, and I'll give it. This morning, I want to tell you something. I lack wisdom. I want to tell you this. When things have blindsided me and I feel weak and I feel like I can't handle all the stress of life, I want to tell you something. There have been thoughts in my mind, motivations in my heart, and even words out of my mouth that I didn't think was there. And what it has caused in my life, and it will in yours, and it probably has in yours, is number one, it's shown me how weak I am when I thought I was strong. And it's driven me to the one who has all power and all wisdom. Our heads are bowed this morning. Can I ask you this question? Do any of you lack wisdom? Are you in one of those places in life where it's not just, if it was just this thing, if it was just this one area, man, I could handle it, but it's coming from all different directions. It's here, it's so overwhelming, I feel like I'm going to crumble. And it's caused some impurities. It's caused sinful thoughts and even sinful behavior and things to come out of me that I never thought was there. But you know what? I'm counting it all joy because God is exposing those things in my life to make me realize I need to depend on Him. Could I ask one more time? Do any of you lack wisdom? Let him ask of God. Giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. Stand with me this morning. Would you just take a moment? Maybe you need to kneel there in your seat. Maybe you need to come forward here to the altar. And let's just take a moment and acknowledge, Lord, I don't know as much as I thought I did. I know very little. And I just want to acknowledge that I lack wisdom, and I'm asking you for this wisdom. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle it. I don't know. When things come at every side, these diverse examinations, I need your wisdom. Ask him.